Today we dive into web components.
And try not to belly flop.
I've got a pink mug today.
Ding.
Web components are the rage, and they sit somewhere in between regular HTML and the big frameworks of React, Angular, Vue, etc. We're going to talk today and in a series about the various parts of web components, why they're good, why they might not be good, why they're hard, why they're easy, if you can consume them into React, Angular, etc. And we're starting today. We're just going to hit some bare basics today and ask some tough questions. So here it goes.
I'm excited, Josh. Mr. J. I'm excited, Mr. J. I think you invited me on the show because I like to ask tough questions.
Absolutely. You have challenged my views on web components, and I've greatly appreciated it. And they've been challenged again with your questions in the back of my mind as I've been researching for these episodes. So some of that will come out. Let me give kind of a demonstration really quickly, showing what a web component can be, a simple one, which they probably all should be, which we'll talk more about that later.
For those that have no idea what a web component is, though, at a high level, the idea is that all the browsers are going to support the standard at some point. I believe web components were started by Google. That standard
I believe
was
so too.
Proposed by Google.
We should probably say real quick that they're supported in most browsers. You won't find things like Shadow DOM in IE or Edge yet, although Edge is currently building support for Shadow DOM. I think it's Shadow DOM is the one that they're building support for.
Does that mean, when you say building support, does that mean they're going to adopt the Chromium core?
Not necessarily. I know that they are doing that as well, but in their official backlog of things being built, there are custom element related things that are on there in process.
How'd you like to be on that team?
That'd be fun.
We're building this browser, but in 6 months we're going to move to the Chromium core.
Yeah, I'd love to see how much that affects. That'd be fun to get an inside view. So that's the 30,000 foot view. Let's dive down into the 10-foot view. So we're looking at a custom element here. That's one of the pillars of web components. You can tell it's custom.
Checkbox.
Yep. You can tell it's custom because it doesn't look like any other element we've seen. It's not the standard div, paragraph, video tag, etc. And it's got the dash in the middle. That's a really big part of custom elements. They have to have the dash in the middle. That signifies to the browser that it might be a custom element or that it can be a custom element.
Yeah, and so that's part of the standard, right? That's built into the standard. You must have a dash in your name.
Yep. So that's how we know it's a custom element. And then it has some standard attributes like all other elements can. And it can also, these aren't showing any custom attributes, but you can also put custom attributes on custom elements. But we'll get to that later. At the moment, you can see that the checkbox over here and the label do have some styles applied to them. One really big note is that there's this style. I'm going to comment this out for a second while you're looking at the funky syntax there and refresh. Notice that without those styles, I guess we have the how-to checkbox up here. We could do the same. In fact, I should have set this up better. Brian, there's a difference between pre-styling a general element. So let's just put all of these real quick.
Yeah, I can see that. I can't see the line number, but the first line of the commented out checkbox is how to checkbox not defined. So this is what your custom element is going to look like when it's not defined.
Yeah, you could think of it as like a loading spinner to indicate that it's not quite clickable yet, maybe, or interactive yet. You'll hear a lot of times in rendering pages that you've got time to interactive or time to rendered, where you can see the rendered items. This is a big distinction between when it's styled, and then let's add a different one for undefined. Let's make it red.
That's really cool. I didn't realize that they had a style for that.
And I don't know if it's really needed. In the times that I've ever seen custom element classes applied to an element, it's lightning fast. The browser takes care of it so fast that it's nothing like a post page load AJAX request. It's never anything slow like that. But we do have that option so that right now it's not defined and it's red.
I want to ask a question about that. What if you want to load like your spinner, like you're saying, but you want to get some data, maybe you want to get some data, you want to populate some data on a JavaScript object, you want to do something that takes some time. People are on slower networks, and then once you have the data, you define your custom element because now it's got what it needs.
That's a really good point.
The use case?
I mean that gets into lazy loading. So you might have some top level logic that you don't even know if you're going to need that ancestor component, so you don't load it yet. But based upon the data you get back, you say, "Yep, I do need that custom component, so I'm going to load that class." That would definitely be a potential use case, but not necessarily for this because you would render it and have it right away. So it's hard to find a use case for this, but I'm sure it's there. So let's see what it looks like when we apply the class. I don't have this loading with the HTML. It's totally separate. You'll see it's a bunch of JavaScript, and at the bottom it's actually doing the work of defining that custom element. And I'm just going to paste that into the console, and now it's defined. I kind of messed up. I shouldn't have had this apply here because it's got two stylings now, but that's okay. We've got our custom element shadow DOM styling applied to it now, which we'll dive into that in a second. And it's interactive. So we've got some different activity, different listeners, different click events happening because we've applied this custom class to it. So that's it, Brian. That's the custom element for the day. Next week, I'm just joking. We'll keep going here. But so I've got a couple questions. If you read the articles, which we'll put in the show notes below, from Google about the overview of what web components are and what they're good for, you will see things like it's cross-browser web standard for creating extending reusable components. Sounds reasonable, and I think I would agree with that. Requires no library or framework to get started. Vanilla JS HTML for the win.
That's nice.
Vanilla is a really strong flavor, so I don't know why vanilla is like the baseline, nothing added. But anyway, that is definitely nice. You don't need something like Angular or all of the surrounding opinions. It's just a base level standard. It provides a familiar programming model, DOM, CSS, and HTML. Everybody knows the browser. Everybody knows the DOM. It works well with other new web platform features like Shadow DOM, template, CSS custom properties. I want to go ahead and give my first issue at the moment. A big part of, in my opinion, the potential benefit of custom elements is encapsulating some styles that need to be with the element that no one else can change. You can still brand it on top if you allow styles to be applied in certain areas, certain variables to be changed, but the structure that's needed for that component is encapsulated and protected in the Shadow DOM. Shadow DOM, however, doesn't work on IE 11. I don't think it works yet on Edge. And to make it work, it used to be a really unperformant polyfill. And now it's a shim. It's a ponyfill that doesn't quite do what the browser's with Shadow DOM does. And it's difficult to work with. So that's my main beef right now. I asked Brian the other day, how long are we going to have to support IE 11? And he smugly replied, forever.
Forever.
So, Brian, I'm gonna quickly walk through this just to get people familiar with custom elements and what it looks like. We've already gone over the HTML part, but let's go into the JavaScript. And again, like I said, you'll find these in the 3 main examples within the Google Web Component overview. They've got checkbox, toggle, and something else. And they've got lots of comments. I kept most of those comments. Hopefully this license lets me show it. They're doing a simple way here where it's just an immediately invoked function expression. Way down here, right down here, it's getting, so when I paste that into the console, it goes. And we're defining a template element. That's a really big key, and I urge you to go look at the spec for HTML template because there's some cool things about it. It provided a new way for us to store good markup in the browser on the client side that's not actually rendered until it's used. So that's a key part. We used to have to do that with JavaScript style or elements or something like that. All right, we're extending a regular HTML element. So that means anything that a regular HTML element can do and does, we already have that. We're observing attributes. This is a key part of custom elements. If we put these in here, then every time we change, there's like a mutation observer basically on those attributes, and we can react to those changing. Here's our shadow root being applied. We're attaching a shadow root to our custom element to throw in our template and apply our shadow styles to. That's a good point. You know what? I should have had, think of a drop-down menu and think of how that select menu with options in it renders differently on Safari than it does on Chrome. That's because those styles and a little bit of the unseen elements of what builds that is in the shadow root, and it's custom to each browser. So now we have the opportunity to do the same thing. We can have a simple element that has our own styles apart from what a user can apply CSS to. And there's a little bit of protection around it. There's some nuances to it, so dive into that one as well, Shadow DOM, and we'll cover each of these in more detail in the coming videos as we see fit. And then here's our connected callback. It's a really good lifecycle event. So consider that you had this in your clipboard, and you literally paste it into the inspector. The act of that going into the DOM is going to be connected, and you'll activate this connected callback. And then they've got some custom private methods in here that you'll want to read this. It's one of the recommendations from Google about handling the properties versus attributes. So dive into that as well. Yeah, so anybody can go right click on an element, inspect it, and in the console just say, this element dot prop equals true. And I think this is saying if somebody does that through other third-party programs or just manually before your class gets applied, before your proper class setters are put in place, before you're connected to the class. Sorry, before its prototype has been connected. Yeah. Then you got to make sure to either reset them or set them up right, make sure that everything's the way you think it should be. It's a good point. It's not something I've considered before. Here's one of the other 3 or 4 or 5 lifecycle messes that we get with custom elements, with web components. Connected callback, and then later on, when it's actually connected into the DOM, that's when the connected callback would run. So this could happen just when the JavaScript is executed. And then when it's actually connected, we can run some other stuff. JavaScript putting it into the visible template, like onto the actual DOM, not in the virtual DOM or in memory or something like that. Actually, let's do this really quick. Let's delete these. And I've got them in my clipboard so I can paste them in the DOM here. Let's refresh the page. Let's make this custom element part of JavaScript so that it's available to us. And then let's put it into the DOM. So this would be connected. Edit as HTML, and we'll throw it right here. See, look at that. So that would have called the connected callback. When I pasted the JavaScript and ran it in the console, that defined it. And then when I put them on the page in the DOM, that connected it to the DOM. Disconnected is the same thing. You got to be really careful, especially in a PWA or a single page application, as you're moving from page to page and you no longer need those listeners or similar type of events. You got to get rid of them so they don't pile up and mess with you. And then some getters and setters. Here's our attribute changed callback, that we can do something when all of the attributes change, all of the ones that we're listening to. So that's it. That's the overview, Brian. I'm really curious what people's questions are. So put a comment if you have any specific questions. You know, how does it compare to React? What's the performance of it? Is it hard? Does it work in all browsers? Any types of questions like that would be phenomenal. Also, Brian, my birthday's coming up, and I have a goal for the number of subscribers on this channel. I'm not going to say what that goal is, but support the goal. Support the goal. You got a couple weeks before my birthday. Hit the subscribe, and while you're at it, put a question on what you want to learn about web components as well. So everybody stick with us. Make sure you subscribe. We're going to make a video. I can't promise it'll be next week, but generally a week or two from now, more on web components. And we're looking forward to seeing you then. Have a good one. Brian, what do you always say? Oh, yeah. Fantastic.